Hey everyone, I think it's time for us to get started. It's just a great pleasure to have you here. As I've mentioned several times, my name is Bill Gibbs. I'll be the host today. I am working remotely out of Austin, Texas, and it is great to see where everyone is located all over the country today, joining us for this session. I'm very excited about this session because this is the first one of our academic season, of our academic year, of the 22-23 academic year. And it will be a great one as well, leveraging technology in a hybrid working environment with Dr. Dennis Beatty. And I'll introduce our presenter and the presentation in just a little bit. Let me talk about what we'll be covering today. Just a little bit about Capital Technology University. I recognize many familiar names on the list of attendees, and so I know that some of you have far more familiarity with the organization than I do, but I always like to talk a little bit about it. We'll go over the session pointers and housekeeping. I'll introduce the presenter, then we'll get right into the presentation. That's the heart of the session today. As he goes along, you can type in your questions in text chat. And I do apologize that I had not enabled text chat, but it is now, and you'll be able to do that. And then toward the end, we'll talk about upcoming webinars in the next few months, how to get a copy of the recording, the slides, and a certificate of participation. Just a little bit about Capital. We're old. We've been around for a long, long time, since 1927. So this decade will celebrate our 100th anniversary. We're one of the only private universities in the state of Maryland, and might I say in the country, specifically dedicated to engineering, cyber, computer science, and tech management. And our speaker today is a product of Capital Technology University, at least at the doctoral level. We're nonprofit, private, and accredited. Each of these are important terms. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but I would like to say that we are a fully accredited university based in Laurel, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., between D.C. and Baltimore. We're accredited by the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, which is regional accreditation, the highest level of accreditation available to any university in the United States. And we're authorized by the state of Maryland to confer associate's degrees all the way up from degrees all the way from the 2-year associates right up to our doctoral programs. Here's some housekeeping. There's just a few. We'll answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation, but you can actually type in your question at any time in the text chat. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll have Dr. Beatty answer just as many as we possibly have time to answer. Microphones and webcams are not being activated for participants today. We'll be sending you a link to the recording and to the slides to all registrants, not only those attending this live session, but those who view it later on demand. And we'll also be making available for this session participation certificates, attendance certificates. If you want one at the end of the session, I'll tell you how to get that. Again, our session today is leveraging technology in a hybrid working environment. I'm really excited about our presenter today for a couple of reasons, but the main one is that he is one of the few people in Capital who've actually completed 2 doctoral degrees with us, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Our presenter is Dr. Dennis Beatty. He's the, let me just read this. Dr. Dennis Beatty is the Activity Chief Information Officer and Chief of Cyber Operations and Security for the Supervisor of Shipbuilding, Conversion, and Repair in Newport News, Virginia. The Shipbuilding, Conversion, and Repair Center is a joint operation between the U.S. Navy and Huntington Ingalls Industries. The organization designs and constructs nuclear power submarines and aircraft carriers, as well as repair and modernize existing subs and carriers for the U.S. Navy fleet. In his role, Dr. Beatty oversees cybersecurity, information technology, and traditional security. And I was just thinking about that earlier today. We're talking about deep secrets, the secrets of our nuclear fleet, and our main deterrence to the enemy. And security is hyper important in that environment, and we're very glad to have someone of his caliber involved with that. He's a 20-year retired veteran of the U.S. Navy. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Studies and a Master of Science in Information Technology from the University of Maryland University College, and has completed 2 doctorates from Capital Technology University, a Doctor of Science in Information Assurance, which we now call cybersecurity, and just recently, I mean this month, finally completed a PhD in human factors. So defended that earlier in the month. He may talk a little bit about that. Now, I always like to have our presenters give a little bit of background at a personal level. So I have a couple of questions I'm going to ask Dr. Beatty to come online. Dr. Beatty, first, thank you for your service in the U.S. Navy, a 20-year Navy vet. Can you briefly share what you would consider to be the highlight of your time in the Navy?
Good afternoon, Dr. Gibbs and Mr. Gibbs, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. The highlight of my career over 20 years was just the relationships built throughout the course of my time in. A lot of those relationships I've had since I was 18 years old and have built the foundation for what it is I do today.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. If we had more time, I'd ask you about all of your duty stations, but if you get an old Navy dog talking, it's going to be there for a while, so I'll avoid that one. For most people, a single doctorate is an achievement of a lifetime. Yet you recently earned your 2nd doctorate, so you have a Doctor of Science in Information Assurance and a PhD in Human Factors. How did you decide to go back and get that 2nd degree?
So one thing I've noticed is, in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, we're sort of recognized as STEM researchers. The primary reason why I wanted to go back into the human factors is it's important to understand how people interact with technology, and not only deciding how technology we're going to put in place, but how our end users and the ultimate customers interact with that technology. My topic was mental health care providers' working conditions in a virtual environment post-COVID-19, because there was little research out there investigating the mental health care providers' perspective on telehealth. My research definitely contributed to the body of knowledge in human factors and identified themes for consideration for organizational leadership, not only in healthcare, but throughout industry as a whole.
Well, that's really interesting. I won't take any more, give you any more questions because I want to get right into your presentation. I believe some of this in your presentation will pop up again. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to give the floor to you at this point, and you can just click on the screen and get started. And welcome. I'm going to turn my video on and mic off at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend today. I hope you find this presentation worthwhile. The topic we're discussing today is leveraging technology in a hybrid working environment. We're going to go back now. So our discussion overview, we're going to discuss the working environment's impact to organizational success, technology's impact on a hybrid working environment. What are your technology requirements for an effective hybrid workforce? What doesn't work and why? What works and why? Work-life balance in a hybrid working environment, best practices, and some of my personal thoughts. The working environment's impact to organizational success. Some things that you may find that you may think are understood, they're actually not understood throughout industry. A positive working environment contributes to employee job satisfaction and organizational success. A negative working environment impacts employee job satisfaction and is detrimental to organizational productivity. For your consideration, over a 90-day period, depressive illnesses in adults in the United States contributed to employees being absent 4.8 days and resulted in 11.5 days of decreased productivity. Over the course of that, that's roughly 18 days of absence and a loss of productivity of 46 days over the course of a year. I don't know too many organizations that can handle that type of loss. Technology's impact on a hybrid work environment. It allows greater workplace flexibility for your team members. It enables emergent access to information without returning to the office. It provides a mechanism for communicating and collaborating with stakeholders in remote locations, whether this is global or whether this is simply 30 to 40 miles away. You have the ability to communicate and collaborate in remote locations. It also provides opportunities for reduction in physical footprint, cutting back on those environmental costs such as power, air conditioning, and potentially other hotel services that are provided within your organization. Also enables office sharing and desk sharing as appropriate for your business. From a negative perspective, there is the potential of mishandling proprietary information for organizations, and there's also technology fatigue, which you would also may have heard referred to as Zoom fatigue. Technology requirements for a hybrid workforce. So what is your business? What is it that your business does? What are you, and what are your information handling requirements? Like what laws are you required to follow through with? Are you are you required to be HIPAA compliant if you're in the healthcare industry? If you're required to meet financial implications and financial laws, do you have to comply with SOX? Or are you in the defense industry and you're handling controlled unclassified information? Or that's whether you're a contractor or government. So what is your business and what are those associated technologies associated requirements that you have to have for your information? How do you want to communicate and collaborate with your hybrid workforce? Do you want to use something like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, teleconferencing? What's the return on investment for your technology? The latest buzz is Microsoft Office 365 throughout industry, and everybody has to have that. Well, if you're a small organization and you're a startup potentially of 3 to 4 people, you can use teleconferencing and free email that's out there if you're not concerned about your information, and you can work with your workforce in that mechanism. In leveraging technology in a hybrid workforce, is there a need to change your business processes? Do you have paper processes that are in place now? Do you have certain systems that, if you have someone down the hall and you walk out of your office, are you required to give that to an employee? Or do you have to transition to digital processes and roll out technology capable of supporting a digital working environment? How will you share and store information? Are you okay with emailing information? Will you use a OneDrive solution? Will you roll out a SharePoint solution? Again, depending upon the size of your organization, what your business is, and how you conduct business, these are contributing factors on how you will leverage technology in a hybrid workforce. What laws limit the geographical employment of technology? So an area I would like to share of why this is important is if you are a mental health care provider, you are not authorized to practice mental health care with patients across state lines. State licensing is per state. It's not a nationwide solution. So for example, say a mental health care provider has a patient that's in Pennsylvania. The mental health care provider is located in Virginia. They're not authorized to practice in the state of Pennsylvania. So that potentially may limit the type of technology that you employ, and also as well limit your employment of technology for providing mental health care services. What technology will you provide to employees to operate in a remote environment? Are you comfortable with a bring your own device type policy? Or are you going to issue portable electronic devices such as cellular phones, laptop computers, desktop computers, Apple products? What technology are you going to provide? Also, what training are you going to provide for those employees to do that? We'll discuss that a little bit more later on about the importance of ensuring employees are able to use the technology that you provide. But it's important to understand that these are things that you need to consider when employing a hybrid workforce. Let's discuss what doesn't work is why. Now, I'm familiar with a lot of the people that are on this list, and I thank you again for coming today. So what does not work and why? And some of you may have seen this in your own workplace. Unequally assigning work to employees in the office versus working remote. So it's easy as leaders of organizations, C-level leadership, whether you're second and third line supervisors, whether you're a deputy CIO, whether you're a deputy CEO, whether you're the CFO, it's very convenient to walk out and look at the cube next door and say, I want to give this to you because I don't really want to pick up the phone or send the email or provide the documentation to the person that's working remote. That is definitely not fair to your organizational workforce. Scheduling meetings and with short notice with only team members in the office because the answer is right now. Again, this is a workforce imbalance. This is not a good way to conduct business employing a hybrid workforce, because if you have an organization that's operating with a 30% hybrid environment on any given day, you are only going to get 70% of stakeholder input, and the other 30% of your stakeholders will feel discounted based on the way that you're making decisions. Ordering technology because you saw it on television. Now, I will share with you that more times than not, I'm a leader of fantastic teams that they get approached with questions all of the time saying, I saw this on television, why can't we do it? Well, first of all, do not order technology because you saw it on television. The question that I would challenge you to ask yourself is, does this technology improve your business? How does this technology improve your business? What technology is in place now that you can expand upon, or you're not fully aware of the features that can benefit your organization? Because as business leaders and leaders in business and people that are concerned with turning a profit, constantly spending money on technology when you're not leveraging the technology that you have in place, nor training the personnel that you have in place to leverage that technology to the benefit of your organization, will result in a negative workplace culture. Not having an acceptable use policy or documenting standing operating procedures for use of technology and file storage. Okay, so this is important, right? So we're all familiar with different types of policies out there when we get our accounts. For example, Capital Technology University has accounts, and we're required to abide by a code of ethics when we're using the Microsoft Office 365 packages. Corporate America and industry, they have acceptable use policies and required trainings that for using technology. The federal government has different technologies and different types of acceptable use policies and different procedures. If your teams are not familiar and you have no way of holding those teams accountable for violating policies, then you have no way of holding them accountable. If you don't have standard operating procedures for the use of technology and file storage, it'll become the wild, wild west. People are essentially going to do whatever they want. You're not going to have file sharing schemes. There's not going to be appropriate use of technology. People are not going to abide by the rules that you think they should. And it is also important to provide these standard operating procedures in a central location, or provide them in writing so they can act, and in writing so they are familiar with the location of these standard operating procedures. Again, this is all about keeping your business moving and generating a profit in business, and protecting information if you are a small business and you've been contracted by an entity to handle controlled unclassified information. Also including classified information, but we're not going to talk about classified information. Assuming employees know how to use technology. It is so easy in today's world with how user-friendly some of the technology that we employ is, that everyone knows how to use it. We have a generational workforce now to where some people are just now coming online with learning how to add a call on a portable electronic device. So as technology evolves, we have to ensure that our employees evolve with it. We cannot automatically assume that when we roll out a piece of technology that everyone is going to be able to use the technology that is in place. That is not fair to you, and that is not fair to your employees. As some of our workforce ages and some of the technology comes into play, we're finding that a lot of our workforce just no longer wants to participate in the workforce because they don't want to learn the new technology that is in place. So at the same time, you can't assume that the younger generation, because they're younger, that they know how to use the technology that you are using in your organization. So documenting and providing standard operating procedures and training is a mitigation strategy for that. And again, we'll get into that later on. Pretending everyone will figure it out eventually and telling employees to just Google it. The famous Dr. Google. Google anything and you will have the answer. If you want to lose employees really quick and they're struggling in your organization, and what you tell them is to just Google it, you'll figure it out. It'll be just fine. Well, that's not necessarily going to work, because they're looking at you as this is the technology, as the leader of an organization that you put in place. And they're assuming that considering you rolled this technology out for your business, that the technology is compliant, that you are aware of everything that this technology is able to do. And the fact that you tell them to just Google it, that kind of tells them you may not necessarily know what you're talking about, or you don't understand the capabilities, limitations, laws, and statutes that are limiting your ability to use this technology. Now that we've gotten all the bad guy stuff out of the way, let's talk about what works and why. Determining and socializing how you will communicate and collaborate in your hybrid working environment, and picking the technology to meet the hybrid working environment needs. So let's talk human factors a little bit, right? So if we're getting into the piece where we're talking about mental health care providers or anybody that's operating in a remote working environment and an in-office working environment, it's important to understand what they need technology to do their job. It is important to understand that when you roll out technology for your organization and for your workforce, that your employees have the ability and going to meet their needs for them to provide the services that they need to their clients, patients, and customers as appropriate for whatever industry that you need. If you're if you have that technology and it meets the requirements, your workforce is going to have a positive experience and more than likely going to be willing to stick around because the technology that is in place is capable of enabling them to do their job, thus you being satisfied with their performance. Validating technology meets your business needs and information handling needs prior to purchasing. If you purchase a product that is not SOX compliant, it is not HIPAA compliant, and it is not cleared for processing or handling controlled unclassified information, you are not going to be able to use that technology to conduct the business that you need it to do, at least without it being authorized to do that. The last thing you need as an organization is to get audited and be told that your information systems and your network infrastructure is not compliant because you didn't follow the rules and regulations of the laws. It will happen to you. It has happened to multiple organizations that think it would not happen to them. A lot of organizations have been hacked previously. Target has been hacked. Lowe's has been hacked. If you want to talk government, the Office of Personnel Management's been hacked. So it's important that you go ahead and make sure that that technology meets the business and information handling needs of your organization prior to purchasing, and you understand the associated maintenance and upkeep that comes with that technology. Again, if you are a business, you're in business to make a profit. You do not want to spend too much money on technology where it's not a return on investment for what you're rolling out. Solicit feedback, documenting, testing, and introducing business processes and supporting a hybrid workforce. So, okay, we talked earlier about not having documented standard operating procedures for rolling out technology. This is what you can do. Document those standard operating procedures, document those login procedures, document how you want that technology to be used within your organization. Test it out, give it to your employees to test out. Because, and I don't mean your IT and your cybersecurity experts or anyone like that. Give it to the people that are going to use the stuff. Because if your customers, your patients, your healthcare providers, your lawyers, your doctors, anyone, if they do not know how to use this technology, again, it's going to negatively impact your organizational culture. So, and gradually introduce these processes. Take a hybrid approach to it, pun intended here, but take a hybrid approach to it. You're going to have a silo of people that are going to be using those manual processes. Then you're going to have people that are going to run right to the digital processes, and they're going to want to keep on pressing on those digital processes and get there already. Slow and steady gets the job done when you're introducing business processes to a hybrid workforce. Additionally, you want to make sure that the same processes that you're introducing in the office, that they're capable of being executed from a remote location, and make sure that you have the technology for that. One of the most important pieces that I would like to share with you today is the importance of soliciting feedback from your workforce on what is working well and what needs improvement for day-to-day operations in a hybrid working environment. Again, as leaders of organizations, and whether you have a team of 3 people or you are an organizational leader of 5 million people, it is important to understand the experiences of your workforce and what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. You may think that everything is going great, your hybrid workforce is doing well. However, they don't have the same level of production as your teams that are in the office. I highly encourage you to stay away from the narrative that if just because your employees are not producing as much in a remote environment, do not necessarily think that that is their fault. It is up to us as leaders, as discussed on what doesn't work is why, is ensuring that, not ensuring that people are familiar with the technology that is in place and that you've rolled out for your organization. So get feedback from your workforce on what's working well and what improvements do they need to see. This could be as anything as an updated operating system, or they may need a piece of software that works a little bit better outside of the office than it does in the office. Additionally, if necessarily if teleconferencing isn't working, then maybe you need to invest in a Zoom product or a Microsoft Office 365 application if your business has grown to that point. There's also free services out there, but we're not going to get into there. I'm not here to sell you a product. That's not why we're here today, and you didn't take your time to hear that today. But it's important to understand what works well and what needs improvement, so you can expand and grow in both areas. Developing and socializing acceptable use and information handling policies, and conducting refresher training. All right, so I know that as smart as we all are, all 25 of us that are on this webinar today, including me, we have something that where we've been doing stuff and it's been going great, and we've been handling our business for a really long time. And I promise you that things I learned 10 years ago, I have no idea some of the things that I learned 10 years ago. That is the importance of conducting refresher training with your workforce. It's to iterate the sentiments that were put in place through your acceptable use policies and those standard operating procedures. So, and also be a part of that refresher training. Do not make yourself exempt from that refresher training, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to learn something else that you didn't already know. And sharing that with your teams, that makes you a good leader and enables your team to want to do better for you, which also promotes a positive working environment in your workforce. Implementing policies to ensure technology remains up to date with the latest antivirus and software patches to protect information. So I cannot understate the importance of doing this and having a vulnerability management plan in place for doing this, as well as providing the documentation and procedures for your workforce to execute this. This is important to ensure that your proprietary information for your business or your healthcare information that you are charged with protected by HIPAA, or your financial records that you're charged with protecting by SOX, and that controlled unclassified information that could be any branch of anything anywhere within the federal government. You want to take all the mitigation strategies possible to protect that information. Make sure your stuff's up to date with the latest antivirus software and patches to protect the information that you've been charged with to protect. Let's talk about work-life balance in a hybrid working environment. In the beginning, we talked about Zoom fatigue, about the impacts of a hybrid working environment. And so we're going to discuss work-life balance a little bit here. A hybrid working environment increases access to information and increased customer service hours. All true, very much true. It was one of the pieces that came out of my data analysis when I investigated mental health care providers' working conditions in a post-COVID-19 pandemic. Working from home potentially may impact employees' work-life balance. This potentially may have a negative impact on work performance due to employee burnout. Also, calling back to Zoom fatigue on that. Leadership is responsible, and emphasis on this, leadership, not constituents. Leadership is responsible for establishing appropriate use of technology, determining the appropriateness of a hybrid working environment for their workforce, monitoring employee perception of communications, and influencing the organizational culture of an organization. What I mean there is leadership has to set the tone. We're going to discuss more on that later on. But it is up to leadership as being responsible for establishing the appropriate use of technology, following those rules that are in place, determining if a workforce is capable and has the need and abilities to operate in a hybrid working environment, determining how the employees think and feel about communications in a hybrid working environment. So what you don't want to have is employees working remote, feeling like they're not part of the team and not part of the decision-making processes when they hold the same positions as someone that has more of an in-office work schedule, vice in hybrid or a 100% remote work schedule, and influencing the culture of an organization. Leadership sets the tone on everything within an organization. I've seen several times where constituents want to do a great job. However, Leadership is the barrier. Do not ever be the barrier to your constituents' success. And since we've discussed healthcare and we've talked government a little bit and we've talked patients and we've talked all of those things, a survey of 128 teachers determined 50% of males and 36.4% of females reported maintaining a healthy work-life balance from home. What I like to point out on this is if you invert the numbers on that, you're looking at 63.6% of females reported not having a healthy work-life balance. Again, a callback to a previous comment. It is up to leadership to set the tone and ensure employees have a healthy work-life balance and enable that. So best practices to ensure that we stay on the what works and why and ensure you have balance within your workforce. Discuss the capabilities with your team and get buy-in prior to transitioning your organization to a hybrid working environment. You want to have buy-in before your employees, before you transition into a working environment anywhere. You don't want to mandate a hybrid working environment. It's important to have employee buy-in and for them to have an understanding about why a hybrid working environment is important to your organization. Encourage employees to have a designated workspace in their remote working environment. This provides a method for disconnecting at the end of the shift. What you don't want to do is have your employees setting up in the living room or setting up in their dining room someplace where they're constantly thinking about work. You want to have your organization to have the ability to disconnect at the end of the workday and maintain some type of work-life balance. Again, that contributes to a positive working environment and mitigates the potential for burnout. Respect employee work schedules. Make after-hours emergent situations requiring employee engagement the anomaly. Okay, so what this means, right? So say you have an employee, their workday starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and they are done at 5 p.m. Do not bother them at 7 o'clock at night when they're having dinner with their family or they're out at happy hour or they're decompressing from the stressful workday that they've had put in place. Really ask yourself, can this wait until the morning? What type of organizational culture are you creating for your organization when you reach out to them at 7 o'clock at night or on a Saturday or on a Sunday when they're decompressing and enjoying their family time and trying to have some type of work-life balance? This should be the anomaly. The question I have that I will challenge you with in this is what noun it will be impacted if you wait until the next day or send an email during that employee's work schedule so they have the ability to go ahead and handle their business during their work time and have their family time because you are enabling a strong work-life balance and enabling good working conditions for that employee. Develop standard operating procedures and have your employees validate business processes prior to transitioning to technology supporting a hybrid working environment. So you want, again, as we discussed earlier, you want your employees to validate the processes that you're putting in place. They will find something that needs work within your workplace. They're going to ask questions based on their remote working conditions of something that you are trying to implement. You want to hear your employees. You want to have their buy-in and you want them to have an understanding of where it is you're trying to get to. It's important to have these standard operating procedures in place because this should be all but a foolproof guide on how your employees and your team should be conducting business in a hybrid working environment. Again, you do not want your employees sitting at home not having any idea on how business should be conducted because they're working from home versus in the office. You do not want to have a negative organizational culture because you will lose your employees to a competitor or another organization. Be open to constructive feedback from your employees. Be prepared to pivot if a specific technology is detrimental to the success of your organization. Again, calling back to what we saw on television. The technology that you see on television with people talking about, I need to click on this, drag on this, order 100 of these, get 50 of these, and we'll sell it to you for this much for a year, and then we're going to balloon your price, right? So be willing to hear feedback on what works. Sometimes you have to cut your losses on technology. If there's technology that's in place that is detrimental to your organization, consider pivoting from that technology. Also consider pivoting from some of those processes that are in place as well. If someone in your organization has a better idea for how for you to conduct business, but you end up with the same result and it saves you money and ends up being more efficient for conducting business within your organization, empower your team to come up with those ideas. Again, as leaders within organizations and those C-level positions, you want your employees coming up with these ideas because that means they care about your business and your organization. And set the tone within your organization through your actions. Disconnect at the end of your shift. So I think those of us that have been in leadership positions, we find ourselves staring at the ceiling sometimes. It's okay to stare at the ceiling sometimes, but don't forget to disconnect at the end of your shift. You know, go for a hike, go do something, go do anything. Set the tone with your actions. Do not be on your portable electronic devices or working after hours like, oh, I just have to do this. I promise you that whatever you're doing at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, it's taking away from someone or something else you should be doing to decompress, get that family time, get those hobby time in, and do something for yourself that ultimately is going to contribute to the success of the organization in which you're part of, because you have that good work-life balance going. It is okay to disconnect at the end of your shift. If, again, what now is going to be impacted by you sending an after-hours email and getting your employees spun up. For the constituents out there, if this is happening within your organization and you're hearing from your people from your boss after hours, I would question the importance and respectfully question of what level of importance it is, and emphasize the fact that it's during your family time. And if you are in a business or an industry that offers overtime for that, please do not ever work for free, right? So do not work for free. It's not necessary, and quite honestly, in some cases, if you're a federal government employee, it's against the law to work for free. It's called the Anti-Deficiency Act of 1884. Highly recommend you look that up. And hold your employer and your bosses accountable within the federal government, and also familiarize yourselves for out in industry of what the overtime and comp time policies are for that. My personal thoughts for you, and this is a challenge for those of us that are all on here. Think of an idea you would like implemented to improve the working conditions in office, hybrid, or remote within your organization. Also, ask yourself, is your idea compliant with laws and information handling regulations, like we talked about earlier, such as HIPAA, SOX, and controlled unclassified information? What are your barriers to implementation? Document those. Have you communicated your ideas to the appropriate stakeholders, whether it's your boss, whether it's a stakeholder out within your organization, or a stakeholder outside of your organization? You could have the next best idea and you could have it in your brain, but if you're not willing to share that idea for the betterment of your organization, which potentially may result in the betterment of yourself, you're not doing anyone any favors right now. And most importantly, you're not helping yourself. I will now pause for any questions. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Beatty, thank you very much. Let me remind everyone that the way that we're doing questions is via the text chat. We're not enabling microphones or video. So just feel free to type into the text chat any questions or comments you have. Dennis, go back to the previous slide where you had your personal thoughts. If you can do that, or I can. Looks like I can.
Yeah, I got a slight delay right now, Bill.
All right. All right. I want to throw this out too. Not only just have questions, but if you have an idea that you think is working in your setting that you want to share with others, this is a great opportunity to do that as well. Now, I had a question while we're waiting for more typed questions to come in. Early on in your presentation, you mentioned that you cannot practice mental health guidance, I guess you could say, across state lines without being licensed in that state. I didn't know that, by the way. I assumed that, you know, you could have a big call center staffed with medical practitioners in, say, New York City, handling the whole country, but apparently that's not true. So do you see states understanding that times have changed, that because this is all a state by state issue, and see any states that are broadening their approach to this, maybe through reciprocal licensing or something like that. Do you see any of that change coming, or is it going to be that way for a while?
So one thing to keep in mind, Bill, and we've talked business a lot in here throughout my presentation today, and there are fees associated with licensing. Unfortunately, states are in the business of making money. There is licensing that comes with, and there's funding that comes with it. I would like to see it get there, only because the one thing that I would not want to hear as a patient is, I'm sorry, I cannot meet with you because you are in the state of Maryland and I'm located in the state of Virginia. That is going to be the detriment of our country from a mental health perspective. I would like to think that it's going to improve in that area, but mental health care providers are going to really have to level this up, and it's going to have to get brought into a bill in some way, shape, or form, actually go through the federal statutes to where it can get put into law to where those barriers can be removed. Now, an area that would need to be taken into consideration, you mentioned reciprocity, would be the fact of how similar are the laws and where is there common ground? Like, is there 90% availability? Is there ability to, like 95% similarity? Where are we here on this? How close are we? And the states would have to partner and negotiate to figure out what they can live with and what they can live without. I'd like to see it get there, though, because the last thing I would want to have happen is one of my friends or family members need a mental health appointment and then not be able to get the emergent services that they need just because they're in a different state with their primary mental health care provider.
Thank you very much. George asked this question. What about organizations that require employees to take home office approved equipment and not turn it off? Many shops require awareness 24/7, particularly in cybersecurity.
Accurate. And thank you for your question. So again, there are shifts involved, and I understand that every industry is different. Cybersecurity is a 24/7, 365 job. In some years, depending on the year, 366. But again, encourage that work-life balance. When you're off, you are off. Burnout is a real thing. And for my cybersecurity experts out there, I would question how effective you are if you're pressing 24/7, 365, because eventually your 100% will diminish. And if that's happening to you within your organization, I highly encourage you to bring that up with your leadership via the mechanisms that are available.
Thank you. Alan asks a very pertinent question. It's in the news all the time now. Recent reports about hybrid learning have indicated that many students have lost years of learning. In your view, how did schools get it wrong, and what can we do to fix it?
So Alan, thank you for your question and good afternoon to you, sir. I wouldn't say they necessarily got it wrong. I'd say it's an opportunity for lessons learned more than anything. We had enough runtime on a remote learning environment to figure out what did not work within our elementary institutions and in our middle schools and our high schools. So the socialization piece, we have lost years from the socialization piece. But again, it's something, these are lessons learned that we could apply for future growth, not necessarily something that was done wrong. To my knowledge, and there was actually a commercial about this, there was one person that I know of that was alive for the first pandemic. We have technology that's in place now, including what we're working on right now. We're actually in remote locations logged into Zoom. This is something that we would not have been able to do 100 years ago before. So it's all about figuring out where that balance is between technology and face-to-face interaction and continuing to grow forward in those different areas. So stating it's wrong, I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but there are definitely opportunities for improvement to ensure that we don't end up in the same situations as we were in 2020.
Thank you. Before we go on, I want to give a shout out to Alan Exner. Those of you who know him well know that those who are working on graduate programs, master's and doctoral programs, Alan is their secret weapon. He is the head librarian at Capitol and has been instrumental in the success of many a person's dissertation or thesis because of providing that. So I just wanted to give Alan a shout out and thank you for joining us today. Jimmy asks this: as leadership, How do we ensure that your personal teleworking are proving equal and fair contributions compared to those personnel in the office without micromanaging? And that is probably the key phrase there. What tools do you recommend to assess contributions from those teleworking? Are those tools different from those to measure office work contributions?
So trust your people that they're going to do a good job, but assess them fairly based on their contribution. In my first one of my what not to do pieces, what does not work and why pieces was assigning work to people based on it's easy when you walk out of the office. Treat everyone fairly and treat everyone in a hybrid and the remote work environment as the same as you do in the office. Hold people accountable to their deadlines and ensure that the work product that they're providing in an office setting is the same as it is from a remote setting. Do not have dual standards for work products based on based on where an employee works. The standards are the standards across the board, whether you're operating in a remote working environment or whether you're operating in an office environment. For your customers and for teams and external stakeholders, the end product should be the same regardless of whether you're working in an office environment or whether you're providing a product from a remote working environment.
So boiling down, what you're saying is accountability and equal workloads are part of that. All right, that is the final question that I see here. I'm going to open the floor to other questions, and we're going to bounce back to those questions if they come in. But I want to also be faithful to everyone's time and to our presenters' time. So we're going to continue on. Let's see, I think we're going to continue on. There we go. All right. There's a small amount of lag time here, and having a hard time getting to where I want to go. Let's see. You talk about Zoom and technology. Let's see if we can get our technology to cooperate just a little bit better.
We've had our challenges today, Bill.
We have. Okay. Every time I think I've become a happy clicker, and I click one too many times and go past this slide. I wanted to let you know that there are some wonderful upcoming webinars in October, November, and then in the new year in January. Dr. Caleb Charles, who runs our cybersecurity programs here at Capitol, will do practical understanding of OS and IT practices and tools on October 6th, same time at noon. Then in November, Dr. AJ Perry, Kareem Perry, will present physics-informed machine learning, the next evolution in neural network development. If you have been interested in machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think this is one that you will really enjoy. And then in January, we return to leadership. A lot of what Dr. Beatty has talked about has to do with leadership, but we're going to specifically look at a presentation called Transformational Leadership, Leading and Following from the Front. Dr. Reginald Freeman will conduct that on January 19th. We'll be sending out more information about each of these webinars as they come, but I want to let you know you can register for them. Let's see if I can get this click to work at this site right here, captechu.edu/webinar-series. That will not only on that site can you register for upcoming webinars, but you can look at all the webinars that are available on demand already. And speaking of that, this one will be available on demand early next week. Now, a copy of the slides and a link to the recording will be sent to all our registrants, and so just watch for an email. We'll also make available to you a certificate of completion, and to do that, when you get the email with the link to the recording, just simply reply, hey, I want a certificate, give me the name that you want on that certificate, we'll be happy to send it to you. For those that are listening in on demand, the certificate is also available to anyone who completes viewing the session on demand. With that, let me return to the floor and see if there's any other questions. Yes, one has come in. The question is, was there anything in the body of knowledge related to virtual onboarding, and how has that shifted? That is a tremendous question, virtual onboarding. And so what have you discovered in your research, Dr. Beatty?
So I'd be questioning virtual onboarding. I would ask to be more specific of what that looks like. what type of virtual onboarding are we talking about here? Because there is different types of onboarding, and it's also industry specific. In some cases, you are required to connect to a network to get your credentials established.
Okay, she says new employee training.
So, okay, specifically from new employee training, there is new employee training out there. It is being done, and it's actually new employee training in a remote environment isn't something new. There's been training out there where training can be assigned in a virtual environment with certificates provided. Now, the one thing I will say about new employee training, and something that has come up in my research, is the lack of face-to-face interaction is a detriment to socialization and becoming familiar with the personnel, the stakeholders within an organization, such as subject matter experts and program managers for specific programs within the federal government.
That reminds me of years ago in my career. I worked for an organization that had 130 different remote locations all around the country, not just remote locations, like almost like storefronts. And the most consistent complaint that employees got was they never met anybody outside their small center, their small little operation. And they relished those opportunities to actually get together with their coworkers. And this was, of course, before Zoom. So that meant that most of they may have heard the voices of their coworkers, but they had never seen them in person. And it was a consistent and chronic concern that, hey, I don't really know the people that I'm working with. I've never met the finance people. And so they reject my finance statement, and I don't know why, and I'd love to talk to them in person about it face to face and hash that out. So I see what you mean, and I understand what she's saying. Okay, any last parting thoughts, Dr. Beatty, before we wrap up this webinar?
Thank you, everybody, for your time today. I know everybody is busy out there, and thank you for your interest. Regardless of what brought you here today, thank you for taking time out of your schedules. I hope you took a piece of knowledge from this webinar that you're able to apply in your workspace, and whether you can do something now to improve your hybrid working environment, or something where you can contribute to the success of your organization or a future organization. Please take the time to do what's right, and because sometimes doing what's right is not necessarily the most popular, but it is what's right for you, and in some cases, what's right for your business. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. And again, congratulations on that second doctorate and all the hard work that represents. And thank your family for enduring that as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And with that, we will close, and you may log out at any time.